Security Minister quoted at the time, that the suspects were beaten and then subsequently died in police custody, the United States pulled all support for the SORTT unit, SORT, at that time, which the minister pointed out, and to be fair, we ourselves have pointed out on Talking Point, was the brainchild of Gary Griffith. Now, Gary is saying, well, I did not say that the man fell out of a chair. According to the newspaper reports, it seems as though he did mention that fact. But then things took an even stranger twist. Well, maybe not so strange. When Gary Griffith used language that he basically said the man died, and I quote what he said in I believe it was a radio interview, so we had his voice on recording from the interview, which was played at the National Security Press Conference conducted by Fitzgerald Hines, that the men died at the hands of the police. And herein lies where I believe now the situation has taken a controversial turn. Because not only is Gary indirectly implying an admittance that they died at the hands of the police, not just in police custody. An important distinction that is trying to be made potentially in the autopsy of the prisoner who was recently deceased in the fracas in the Port of Spain prison. We'll get to that right after this. But then he pointed out the fact that, look, 50 police have died within the year, every year, since he's been commissioner. What about that? Are we going to do anything about that? Are we going to do anything about the people that died within the custody of the prisons? He made a point to mention that. But what he doesn't seem to understand is Dr. Amy Brown, Minister of Foreign Affairs, is not pointing to the fact that the government has taken action against SORT, that the government has made decisions about the police service, that the government is taking action officially on the situation, at least not yet. He was pointing to the fact that the American government pulled support for SORT because they could not, by law, support any unit or body that, is reasonably confirmed, I can't remember the exact language, or implied to be involved in undermining or breaking or denying basic human rights, the Leahy Law. Former Commissioner Griffith is trying to compare the situations, and in many ways they can be compared, but he's saying, well, why don't we pull support for the prisons? To what extent does the United States support the prison service? And if they do, then maybe Commissioner Griffith has a complaint if that support was not pulled. And that's the thing. I said on this show that the Prime Minister's and the government's insistence about vetted units, I think it was because it came from the United States. Karen Nessishera repeatedly said that when our government went to meet in one of the most recent national security meetings where they went to Washington, she says they were summoned. And to some extent, I can't fault her for that. I think that might just very well be true. But more importantly, whenever anybody pushbacks about, oh, we've had vetted units before, this was a vetted unit, that was a vetted unit, I always said, and if I didn't say it publicly, and I'm misremembering history and I'm trying to rewrite history now, I apologize. But I always thought, at the very least, if I didn't say it publicly, which I think I did, on Talking Point, obviously, is that the requirements for new vetted units came from the United States because part of them cooperating with us is for them to be able to trust us that we do not have any sort of corruption or leaks, compromising positions. And compromising positions could be ties to the criminal underworld or just nothing to do with crime, with the violent criminal organizations, but still illegal activity, extrajudicial activity, which they themselves can't be associated with, which could undermine any sort of crime-fighting effort. Because if it comes out that a unit was involved in illegal activity, it brings the question, all of the police activity, the arrests, the investigations, the actions that it has undertaken, when it was reasonably considered to be under suspicion of conducting such activity. And to some extent, that's what we saw with SORTT. The head of the unit was suspended and investigated, and the matter is still, I believe, before the courts. We don't have, and who knows when we will get a resolution to that matter. But also I wanted to point out, because there was another controversial thing. Part of the former commissioner's defense, and I think on a technical level he is incorrect to say this officially in such a manner, when trying to show that he is technically correct, that he has a better understanding of the fundamentals of law over the government, over the prime minister, over his critics, to then turn around and say, these two men involved in Andrea Barrett will never be able to harm anybody again. Well, to some extent, the statement is not untrue, except those two men never had a day in court. And I said this yesterday about a different matter. With regards to the person who died, the case that he was in remand, that case can't move forward. Who's going to try a dead man? And the same holds true here. So him to say that, unfortunately, legally, they're not convicted. We will never know the truth. The truth potentially died with those two men. Worse yet, if they were not the only ones involved. If they weren't the only ones involved, that means that there are others scot-free. That means that the police bungled their investigation. It's a possibility that I obviously cannot substantiate. That's why you don't let things like this happen. But it did happen under Gary's watch. And it's one of those things where he's not going to listen to me. But I would advise him to be a little bit more careful, because when he listens to the advice of his advisors, his communication specialists, his public relations specialists, he comes across very well. Very well. He has a capacity, if it wasn't for the fact that we knew aspects of his personality, to be a leader. But then, like other politicians, he falls into the trap of having to be defensive, to defend himself when he's emotional. And now we get these statements, which I don't appreciate. Except for the fact that, yes, this whole situation, we should not forget it. Apparently, the United States, they took decisive action to met out consequences that was reasonable from their end. So therein lies my final point on this matter. You're looking into the situation with the SSA. I get it. It only took care. The Prime Minister said he was concerned for 2 years, but apparently now the police moved. So his concerns, the police moved on their own independently. That's what we're led to believe. The Prime Minister's concerns for 2 years actually have no bearing on the case. The two men that fell out of a chair that passed away under mysterious circumstances. Let's not forget the previous prisoner who passed away. Not this one, the one before. A private autopsy revealed things that probably they didn't want to be revealed, that the state autopsy did not reveal. Now these two men passed away. Now the Minister of National Security is basically saying, look at Gary, this happened under his watch. Look at what happened under his watch with regards to the US support for our units. All of this is his fault. Why didn't you say something about it then? Because it was a mistake, right? A mistake that you didn't want to admit at the time until you had no choice. You held on to that mistake for as long as possible, because to say that this played a part in the Prime Minister's lack of trust and confidence in the Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffin, at the time is interesting, because when it happened, no action was taken. Action was taken over an FUL fiasco that is only implied, not spelled out in detail, an FUL fiasco that potentially we are currently seeing the current commissioner continue with a different potential fiasco of the FUL's handling. They didn't make any action or take any action about the fact that 2 men fell off of a chair, according to reports, and then died mysteriously. Oh yes, the police, okay, the head of the unit was removed. The unit was, for all intents and purposes, repainted, reskinned, right? They just took a lot, apparently, I could be wrong about this, but from what I understand, usually when they change units, they just take the same guys, put them in a unit. Ta-da! But Gary was scot-free. Now he's lying to the Prime Minister. He lied, to the Prime Minister. I don't remember this situation being, or Gary Griffith's involvement rather, to be more specific, being such a big deal then. So why now? All right, let's just go quick with the second story, because it ties into all of this. And the second story is that very same recent case of one of the inmates passing away in hospital after it is alleged that he was beaten. The autopsy from the state can't go forward because, from what I understand, the family needs to officially confirm the body of the deceased, his identity. And the family is basically not cooperating because they want an independent autopsy. They want an independent pathologist to conduct an autopsy so that they could be sure about the results. And I can't blame them because of what happened last time. And the fact of the matter is, Gary is right while being wrong at the same time with regards to the situation in prisons. Because he said, well, what about the prisons? People died in their custody. Yes. We should condemn that as well. The lack of official action towards the prison service over these 2 deaths now that we know of does not mean that the case with the Andrea Barrett suspects should be forgiven and forgotten. This case here needs to be pursued like the one before it. Like the case with the 2 men in police custody over Andrea Barrett, the individuals should face the consequences, all those involved. And if the higher-ups were also involved, to the extent that they were, they should also face consequences. And I applaud the family for being willing to take this step up front. To some extent, I am curious to know what would have happened if there were 2 autopsies, how different they would have been this time. What we do know is this time, apparently, doctors are trying to figure out, maybe he had an illness. And that's why he passed away. And he just happened to have been involved in a violent confrontation that involved at least 17 prison officers. This is how democracy dies, not by thunderous applause, but by systematic, slow but sure paper cuts. This might seem like a matter that has nothing to do with us, but trust me, one day an innocent man is going to be in prison, and something bad is going to happen. And the state wouldn't want to conduct the trial that probably could have exonerated him. They would just want to sweep it under the rug. And that innocent person could be any one of us. Let's take a break. When we come back, we should have the good lady herself to join me via Zoom. I am via Zoom, but we're still live here on Talking Point of WSND Content Capital. We'll be right back after this.
Imagine a world where arguments don't exist. CICR is a full-service conflict resolution company that offers mediation training and workshops for all. In 2024, our 40-hour workshops are back, giving you all the tools you need to become a certified mediator in Trinidad and Tobago. Want to know more? Call us at 768-6778 or visit our website. Let's work together to make the world a better place.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the game.
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
And we're back, and we're live via Zoom. Sean Michael Smallhead, joined by the good lady herself. You know her. You love her. Yes, you do. You know you do. Karen Shashera, former Minister of Finance, attorney at law, legal scholar, and one could argue the person who, I mean, it's interesting. You had less than a term, Karen, but you were center stage for so many things that are still relevant and still coming into play today, especially with regards to a lot of the laws that have been passed recently and throughout the current administration, as well as, of course, You're well aware of what's going on in the energy sector. It's one of the topics that you focus on particularly because we're still tight. Yeah, but things, as every time it seems that we get some good news, bad news comes back. And right now there are a lot of questions with regards to, well, is anything progressing? All of the deals, nobody's talking about them. We've just spoken about that. But more importantly, when the Prime Minister made some remarks about the success of Heritage, I pointed out, well, right, but what about Paria and the company that which is maintaining the refinery or is holding the refinery, and the remains of Petrotrin itself and the debt from the restructuring that it undertook? What about all of those things? It wasn't just Heritage that came out of Paria. Heritage is not like Carl, the reborn, Petrotrin, sorry. And we can't just look at the success of Heritage to say, oh, we fixed all of the problems with this restructuring. A lot of problems still exist and are still festering. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's what causes us, as usual. I know your listeners know that we do talk beforehand so that we do have some sort of meeting of the minds as to what we think we should speak about, you know? And I think two things that made it resurface, the whole energy issue resurface, was one, the comments made by Kevin Randaran in response to statements made by the Minister of Energy, and I think also the Prime Minister in his Monday meetings, as well as not only, and his comments about Heritage saved Trinidad and Tobago. That was the headline. I don't know if he actually said those words, but certainly that was the headline they carried. So it made one think, well, let's look back. He's doing as though, let me just start by this. Petrotrin was the holding company. Tobago Petroleum Holding Limited is now the holding company. Under Petrotrin, the Heritage, the exploration and production would have fallen under Petrotrin. So to do as though Heritage has nothing to do with Petrotrin is, I would say, I don't want to use it misleading because I think the new habit is to sue people for saying things that are not right. So I want to be careful. But what I do know that Petrotrin was made up of different divisions. One of them was exploration and production, which is which would have been the Heritage component. Paria was a marketing, but not marketing of other people's fuel in the extent of refining it. We would import crude and refine it into different products, but not what it is today. And then there was a refinery who did the work. So to do as though Heritage was not part of Petrotrin. If you had not closed on Petrotrin, it would have been part of Petrotrin. So all the success that you are speaking about of Petrotrin would have happened in any event had it remained part of Petrotrin, the company, right? And the thing that one has to bear in mind with all it is impressive, and I will give credit because we have audited accounts which show that Petrotrin has made significant profits, then Heritage. So one could argue that Petrotrin could have done the same thing, because when you look at the production per barrel, it has so decreased from what it used to be. I actually got some of the figures in order to make sure that I got it right. I wouldn't even go back, I'll go as far as 2008, when it was 114,257 barrels per day that we were producing. By 2019, it fell to 58,904. In 2022, it fell to 51.6. And in 2023, November 2023, it was 49.3. So when Touchstone says they've got 141% increase in production, I think in one of their wells, is 7,000 barrels they're talking about. Okay? The refinery was built to process these 140-something thousand barrels per day. So to tell me why Heritage is looking good and looks good, because had it been still part of the Petrotrain and not the Trans-Tobago Petroleum Holding Limited, of which it is part, we would have gotten those same kinds of results. Those same, which would have been the same time. So doing as though heritage somehow saved, because heritage is part of the, and if you doubt that heritage is part of what Petrotrain was, I'm sure we all recall when the Minister of Finance in Parliament, I think a few years back, when they had closed down Petrotrain, had made this big announcement that Patriots, who were formerly OWTU, were going to buy, were the bidders that had won the bid to purchase Petrotrain. And they'd given them significant incentives, moratorium on payments, you didn't have to pay cash up front. I mean, you name it, they gave it to them. Yet, and in fact, you had your Prime Minister on the verge of our elections. I don't know if he's holding a pen, but he certainly says, I have a pen here, ready to sign, where's Patriot? This is about a few weeks before elections. And why did it fall apart? It fell apart because when the lender decided that, no, you cannot separate heritage. But I don't think we're worrying about Paria, because Paria is a drain on our foreign exchange, because they only importing to export and using up our foreign exchange, not exporting much, they're using it for the local market mostly. But they said you're not going to separate heritage and Paria. Finally, we have a priority lien. So if one goes, all goes. So if you have any idea, if you have any thought that heritage is a standalone company, when they made the announcement that the deal with Patriot had reached a bump in the road and that they could not go forward because of that priority lien from the lenders, and because the lenders were not separating heritage, because heritage was part of Trans-Tobago Petroleum Holding Limited. In the same way, it was part of Petrotrain. So I don't know how we having Petrotrain saving us, and that it was a good thing we closed on Petrotrain, because whether it was Petrotrain or TTPHL, in the same boat, they were before. Same boat they were. And by the way, if you want to go down that road, what about AV Drilling? When they were suing for $8 million for gas that for oil that was alleged that was never delivered, and they got significant independent international organizations to say that the oil it was not, the mats wasn't matzing. Yet, with all the mats not matzing, nevertheless, the government had an arbitration, and we willy-nilly, he used that expression, willy-nilly for Paria. So I'm going to use it for them too. Willy-nilly, we paid his friend, his financier, that's his words, and well, he said, he didn't come out and say it like that, but he had to admit it. And either his daughter or some family member, very close, and was in the Senate and then came off, and paid them $2 million willy-nilly. That is the for oil that many people said was never delivered, to the point that they wanted to go. So I don't know, was this swan song about heritage success story? No, I'm not taking anything away from Mr. Kwamina, but Mr. Kwamina, with all due respect, as chairman, that's the capacity in which I'm saying that. But it's all still part of what used to be Petrotrain. It was the exploration and production, and guess where you are at 53,000 barrels per day when it used to be 114,000 in 2019. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I really want to know. And then, of course, the other thing that piqued my interest and caused me to want to revisit, was it a good thing to close down Petrotrain? Because there's still that argument that people see that the real reason, and I'm not, by the way, please don't say that I'm saying it. I'm saying there may be value in the argument that it was ready to break the back of OWT, which is considered the most powerful union in the country. And if that wasn't the intention, it did happen. And the unfortunate thing about it is, Paria, which was the marketing side, but marketing our refined products, because we would get the crude, refine it, and sell it as aviation oil, diesel, etc., to the local market and some down the Caribbean. Now, what is the story of Paria? Because Paria is part of Petrotrin, as it is part of Trinidad and Tobago Petroleum Holdings Limited. It's still part of it, you know. So, two stories of Paria. One, I suppose, I don't know how that letter got in the newspaper, but I'd have to say the chairman, Newman George, I don't know how somebody took that letter from him and got it in the papers. But however it got in the papers, what we found out was that he was begging the Minister of Finance. They were bankrupt. They had creditors out there to provide them with refined fuels sitting out at sea because they owed, I don't want to exaggerate, $650 million, and they were not only able not to pay their creditors, they were not able to pay their taxes. That is a story of Paria. Not only were they they may have tried to turn it around now, not only was our refinery refining what they were now having to bring in and buy now, but of course, how were they paying the creditors? Not the U.S. And I don't know if you know what the U.S. position is now, but just a few months ago, having been about 10 billion in 2015, it went down to 6.8 this year, earlier this year. Then it fell to about from 6.8 to 6.2 in the last 3 months of 2023. And as you know, I've said it before, I think in January, this is the central bank report, I didn't check for this month, it went down to 5.6. Now, what does one think from, what does one have to conclude? It means we're not producing the refined products from the refinery, but we're importing, and in order to pay your creditors, you're using up the US dollars. And of course, the last part of Paria, something has to be wrong with how Paria manages its business, because we know of the death of the divers. And the point about it is, which is, I mean, it is beyond understanding that if one understands, and I've said it already, and I'm going to say it again, that if the loan commissioner found that both the independent contractor and Paria were both liable for the gross negligence resulting in the death of these divers, for which they have yet to receive any form of compensation because of the contract that Paria had with the independent contractor and his part it played. When it came to the second component, where he found liability, it was regards to failure to attempt, not only failure to attempt, to stop. I think he used the word stop, the attempt to rescue the divers. Where one of the divers, I think it's Mr. Boudram, had come up and said they were still alive, and I think they were hearing sounds in the sea line indicating at least for 6 hours people were alive. But the point was, at that point in time, you cannot tell me that the board was not involved. They may not have been involved in the second part because they let a company run its business, but certainly when it came to the rescue part, they had to have been consulted by the higher in Paria, and that decision not to make any rescue effort was what the loan commissioner found them to be liable. It's called a form of corporate manslaughter. And to think that they alone, not LMSC, because in fact he said that LMSC tried to rescue their wood and they were stopped. So they alone are responsible for that side. They alone, that is, and you cannot separate that from the board, because the board had to have been consulted and have had to have given instruction. It only stands to reason. I mean, I can't see a CEO going against the board. And I can't see the CEO not consulting with the board as to what is the next step. And to see that they did not only step down or fired, but you having them pay the compensation to the people and then saying to the people, we can't just pay out money willy-nilly like that when people have died. So Paria's track record in terms of being a liability, the chairman himself said we can't pay the taxes and we only creditor 650 million. Please, Minister of Finance, give us the money to pay. All of that would have been part of Petrotrain, as it is part of Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. So don't think that Heritage and Paria are not part of that. And which comes finally to the point of the refinery itself. The reason that was given to us by the Prime Minister was that a bullet payment was due in the next 2 years, I think up to, I think it's 850 or 650 million US, it was a lot of money. And that they simply were not in a position to pay it. However, we have on record, at least in the newspapers, so please, if they quoted the minister wrong, I'm using that as my, not my evidence, as my basis.
Your source.
Yeah, my source of information. Thank you. The minister said we could have restructured that loan. We could have done something, because what happened was that, in other words, that bullet payment. That's why a lot of people think it was used as an excuse to shut down the union, because he came out and said we could have restructured that bullet payment. And on top of that, what is very noteworthy is that after having given all these assurances to Patriots, which is for OWTU really, that on all this, everything was in order, at the last minute, they turn around and say, oh, we have a stumbling block. But that stumbling block was known before the Prime Minister said, I'm ready to sign. What happened? I'm ready to anyway in 2020. I'm ready to sign, I'm ready to sign. But he knew, because I saw the contract. Someone sent me the contract. And it was, I think it was June, it's certainly long before I'm ready to sign. And he ready to sign, they knew that the lenders had said, no, we not separated Heritage from the refinery or Para. All three of them are under the heading of Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. And we have first lead, priority lead. And therefore, if one goes, all has to pay. And the government obviously was not prepared to make that decision, because it meant that their starboy Heritage, which saved the country, would have gone down. And there was a level of, I don't think, of being forthrightness, I will say, if you let people to believe, and that includes the country, because you might say 3,500, 5,000 workers working there. It doesn't matter how many people working, is what it meant to the revenue of the country. I mean, you can't deem that unemployment level. I mean, you have to look at solely, you have to look at what it meant towards the revenue of the country. And shutting that down, and the Joint Select Committee had recommended restructuring, because one of the major problems with Petrotrain, as in many state enterprises, except this one is important because this is the revenue maker for Trinidad, right? It's a revenue maker for Trinidad. Was to restructure, i.e. is a nice word of saying you have too much staff. They also recognize too much political patronage, which would have affected or blurred the decision making. And thirdly, they recommended trying to tie in the contract for the crude oil. So when you're taking a risk too, when it goes high or get low, when you buy in the crude, opportunity to make money. So there was recommendations to restructure, reorganize Petrotrain. And it seems to me that this whole thing with Ram Narayan, which started me off, is that Reverend Ram Narayan, came out and said that the Prime Minister, I mean, I can't believe these people, you know. I just really don't believe these people. I don't believe these people. I mean, Mr. Stewart Young, I'm sorry, you don't have to like me, Minister Stewart Young, but don't take it personally. I said it already. You go on and talk about Train 1. When you know Train 1, dead, buried, no natural gas, right? You knew that. That's number one. And then you talk about restructuring and all this thing. I give it something. Well, I guess as a politician, you have to give a good news story. But it was not a true story based on what train one is a long time, over a year, that was the case, right? But for the Prime Minister to say that 20 contracts, he had two kinds of contract, upstream and downstream. I think there were 10 upstream contracts. He said they'd all expired. That was, but Kevin Ramrine said that is not true. They were not, none of them had expired. And secondly, with the downstream, if I'm getting it right, which is the Port Lisas, there were 20. He said they'd all expired, only 2 out of 20. And then he says that, and as Kevin Ramrine had said, and I'm not taking his side, but if all these contracts were not due to come to an end until 2018, 2017, some to 2024, who is not to say that they were not negotiating quietly, like how you negotiating the dragging field thing? We don't hear anything about it again. I'm not saying it's not happening, you know. I just know you to talk about it a lot. And I'm not hearing you say anything about it these days. Which make me wonder how come you're not saying anything about it. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm just saying I'm not hearing you saying anything about it. I'm not hearing you say anything about Lauren. I'm not hearing you say anything about Manatee. You know, and I find that strange because, you know, we are short of natural gas, both for the LNG. They operated at 60% capacity, and about 9 to 10 plants in the Point Lisas industrial estate have closed down because they don't have natural gas. And one of the largest one closed down their big one, went to the smaller one because they don't have natural gas, right? I'm not hearing you saying anything about that. And as Kevin Ramnarine said, and other people have said, not he, because some people have responded, they said that the tax incentives and that were given by the former government were, had they not done that, we would not have SIP, we wouldn't have Angelin, we wouldn't have Juniper. And I will not put my head on a block on this, but the CGL, the Caribbean Gas Company Limited, and TME down in La Brea, which my understanding is that the commercial transactions for that were negotiated by a former minister who was not a minister of the government prior to this government. So this idea of you don't negotiate anything, 2040, you yourself said we had no gas and we still do have it. We have no production and we still do have it. So why would Shell and why would BP and all these companies want to negotiate as shareholders with a country that doesn't have production and gas prices have, I mean, it went to 170 today, but 150 something and so on. Why would you put your money there when you have ExxonMobil across the road with Ghana, where you get plenty gas, natural gas from? These are business people, and we're not hearing anything about it. And I don't think the gentleman said, I don't want to say I'm picking up for Kevin Ramnarine. I read the article, so I agreed by the article. I read him to say that these contracts had not expired, so it was not true to say that they had expired. And he said, go to NGC and you would find out they had not expired, number one. So to say that was not true. That was the first thing that he responded, except for 2 out of 20, which was going month to month. So that was blatantly not true. And for the Minister of Energy now to be saying whatever he's saying about whatever he's saying that you're going to wait till the last minute to negotiate. I mean, I don't think that was happening at all, because if we go by the CGL issue, apparently those things, the commercial transactions were going on under a former administration of this administration, right? So that it's just plain, I mean, I want to be careful because I don't want any lawsuit. And I don't want anybody saying that I saying things that I saying what I read in the papers, and I seeing what both parties have said. And I think, unfortunately, Minister Young, you come across very aggressive, very defensive. And anytime anybody is defensive, it's because usually a defensive person is a person, I'm not saying that of you, but I'm not a psychiatrist or therapist, but I would think when you have to take a defensive posture and an aggressive defensive posture, it's because things not good, and you know things not good, and you're trying to deflect and blame. And I found it was very, but actually I'm not surprised at this government because that has been their playbook, and that certainly has been the playbook of this minister. He's become more and more aggressive in his tone and more defensive in his tone. And it is not right to also mislead the country, because I think if either your own prime minister or you have not corrected him, you lead the public to believe something that is not true. And the fact that the number of people that were lost their jobs is more, to me, an issue of the union rather than taking into account the impact it has on the revenue take. And to boast about Paria would have happened under Petrotrim because that was the holding company at the time. And the fact that you cannot hand over Guaracara refinery to Patriot is because of that priority lien that it came in the very last minute with, which you knew had to moon about, because I saw the contract and it certainly wasn't 3 weeks before the elections when he said, I'm ready to sign. You know, you just don't have any confidence in things. So should Petrotrin be closed down? No. By the way, the last point I will make on that is that I understand there are 27 plants on the 1.1 million acres of Petrotrin. What do we...
Karen, we do have to take a break.
We have to take a break.
So we're going to have to hold on to that point.
Yeah.
I'll just say, yes, Mr. Ramnarayan seemingly has facts, and the Minister of Energy seemingly is very defensive with rhetoric. So I don't like how it plays out, and I agree with you. Between you and the professor, I'm turning around now about the refinery. Unfortunately, yes, the debt is saddled to the refinery, as you pointed out. So it's making it very difficult to move forward. So, Prime Minister, we'll believe you when we see it, that somebody actually takes over the refinery. Promises at this point, it's hard to believe. But we have to take a break for news now. When we return, Karen has her final point on this matter, and then we open up the phone line. Still taking call, folks, here on Talking Point. We'll be right back after this.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sarah Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Defense Force worker involved in fatal crash released. Barataria police boast of reduction in crime. Minister Hines says he's unaware of its internal challenges at the SSA. Now for the details. The soldier who was involved in the hit-and-run accident on the highway in Presal on Thursday, 28 March, which left a Kiss Bakery delivery truck driver dead, has been released. The deceased is 55-year-old Neil Balai of Eccles Trace in Spring Village, Valsine. Balai and another man were in the truck proceeding south along the Solomon Hochoy Highway when a black Hyundai Ioniq Nissan registered PDR 7741 hit them from behind, causing Balai to lose control. The truck ran off the highway, killing Balai at the scene. The car, which is registered to a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, identified as Jelani Map, fled the scene. Officers of the Barataria Police District have announced a significant achievement in crime reduction. During a recent town meeting at the Barataria Community Center on March 25th, Senior Superintendent Movin Edwards revealed to residents that serious crimes in the division has decreased by 30%. According to Senior Superintendent Edwards, the Barataria Policing District recorded 100 serious crimes from January 1st to March 25th, 2023. In contrast, for the same period in 2024, only 70 reports were received, marking a 30% reduction. Additionally, the division currently boasts a 19% solvency rate, Expressing further goals, Senior Superintendent Edwards stated that the division aims to achieve a solvency rate of 30 to 35%. National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines has absolved himself of blame regarding the ongoing issues at the Strategic Services Agency. Addressing the media at his ministry's headquarters in Port of Spain yesterday, Minister Hines emphasized that although he holds constitutional responsibility for the SSA, he was unaware of its internal challenges. He asserted that had he been informed of the situation earlier, he would have taken prompt action to address the agency's issues, expressing a willingness to rectify the situation on behalf of the government.
When we began to hear murmurings and public disquiet about the dispensation of firearms in the country, Tom, Dick, Harry, drunk, deported, criminal record under 21 with gun, in some cases 47 gun, 45 gun, 29 gun, just so. We became concerned because all commissioners, all previous governments, including the one that he was a part of, he was a Minister of National Security for 14 months. And all governments practiced a restrictive policy on the business of firearms. And more so now, because the United States, there are many states in the United States that don't practice a restrictive policy where you assess an individual application on the basis of need, on the basis of capacity to safely manage this lethal weapon, inherently dangerous thing, and then you issue it on the basis of that.
With that, City News on the Hour on WESN. I am Sira Ali. Thank you for watching.
Imagine a world where arguments don't exist. CICR is a full-service conflict resolution company that offers mediation training and workshops for all. In 2024, our 40-hour workshops are back, giving you all the tools you need to become a certified mediator in Trinidad and Tobago. Want to know more? Call us at 768-6778 or visit our website. Let's work together to make the world a better place.
And we're back here live via Zoom. Sean Michael Small, Karen Shera, Wednesdays on Talking Point on WSN, the content capital. The refinery, it can't be sold easily because of the debt from Petrochim's restructuring. That debt can't just be pushed off to the side to allow the refinery to be sold on its own. One of the reasons why Karen is saying, hey, we can't separate the various components and say, look how great heritage is, while Paria, Guayakara, and Petrochim itself, you know, at various stages of disaster, maybe getting there, close to. Karen, you had a final point to make.
And the point you have to make with Paria was the marketing for our refined products. That is what his job was. What Paria is doing is importing refined products because they closed down refinery, which means they are utilizing foreign exchange in order to do that. And we already said their thing. You cannot separate the Petrotrin from Trinidad and Tobago Holding Company because Petrotrin had three divisions: the refinery, the marketing of its refined products from the crude that it refined, and the exploration and production, which is the heritage. So I just want to make sure that we understand that. And that the minister did say that we could have restructured. And what the last point I was really making was that it is clear that there were efforts being made by various governments to go to clean energy. because of the international standards that were being imposed, because a lot of our oil is crude oil. And we had the gas to liquid with Malcolm Jones, went to arbitration. We won. I don't know if they were happy about it, the government of the day, because it was on this government. And then the partner with whom they had partnered countersued, and they lost and had to pay Petrotrin's cost. So it seemed as though whatever Malcolm Jones did on gas to liquid was not such a terrible thing. But then they did something. Then the next government came with the ultra low sulfur diesel using the same plant. It's the same plant that they were using. There were difficulties with it. And then we finally came with Nikwan, which among its
same plant, right?
The same
Nikwan
plant.
is the same plant.
All of them using the same plant. So all of them using the same plant. All of them using the same plant, but different difficulties. But the idea is always to reach a point where you can produce green energy and move away from what they call gray energy, which is the natural gas energy. But they all had the same objective. And going to the point of the problem with the natural gas is among its many problems. I'm not here to, talk about all of Nikwan's problems, which are many and varied. One of them was that they had to have the assurance that they got without the natural gas, because the natural gas was necessary to do the transformation. And that's where the government formed a company called trying to be upstream, downstream, something limited.
Limited, yeah, something
right?
limited.
In which they would give 20% of their minister's share to Nikwan. And one of Nikwan's arguments was that they stopped giving them. And of course, the government answer was, well, you ain't paying us. But the bottom line is this: that's just more evidence that we are in a natural gas, we are in serious problems. As I already said, the Atlantic LNG is operating at 60% capacity. That was an article from Ratmaraj. I like to get my sources. And also that about 10 plants have closed down or mothballed in the Point Lisa. And as you know, the Titan, I think it was the largest methanol plant, closed down their operations and operating under their smaller plant to produce methanol. Why? Because they're not getting enough natural gas.
Which was closed down. They're swapping. They're going through the effort. They're not just shutting down one of their two. They shut down the smaller plant. And now things are... No. I believe they had the small plant shut down first. And now things are so bad, they're having to say, well, we're gonna shut down the big operations and restart the small operations to scale back.
Why? It's all the same reason, no natural gas. And I'm not hearing my minister, who's always so garrulous, can I say, so verbose, may I say, about the dragging field, about the Lauren and the Manatee, taking place for SIP and Antolin, which was the work of the negotiations of a former administration. And yet he says, you're going to wait before a contract finish. What nonsense is that? Obviously, you don't wait till the end, but you know what the reality is? Woodside turn around and say, here, we ain't going further with that devoted. It's uneconomic. It's uneconomic because obviously they probably know natural gas. So don't say you're going to wait till it's going to expire to negotiate. Negotiate. Right now I saw you negotiating, but I don't know how I'm in your negotiation because I saw things was going good with hear about it. Because I know one thing about all due respect to you, Minister Young. All due respect to you, Minister Young. But if you think you could give us a slight thing of good news, you'd be out there telling us. And if either you want to come one day with a big surprise and say, you thought I wasn't doing this is what happening. But somehow I'm not going to hold my breath. So we started this whole conversation about should Petrotrin have been closed down. All arguments seem to be that it did not have to be. The Minister of Finance even admitted we could have renegotiated the note that was due, and therefore you're trying to lease and sell that same refinery 5 years later. So somehow you must see some benefit in that refinery. So all goes to say that perhaps the what is being said out there that the reason for closure of the refinery was more to shut down, to close down OWT, the most powerful union in the country. And it gives some credibility to that argument. I did not say yes, I did not say no. I said it gives credibility to it. And I said, as far as y'all are concerned, I don't know what y'all have done except talk. But that's what always do. Y'all do anyhow. I'm going to talk vernacular. That's what always do anyhow. Just talk about Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. You talk about the gambling thing. You talk about the game changer with in Tobago. The gentleman passed away recently, and his children have taken over. The big tourism hotel chain that never came to pass. All of this is a Toko port. Everything is at a talk. They're there 9-10 years. Oh God, deliver now.
Well, as I open the show, folks, a lot of charisma from the garrulous ones, like the minister and the other minister.
I like the garrulous, because he might say garrulous me talking shippiness. So the verbose ones.
The verbose ones. Beware charismatic leaders, folks, because their mistakes are magnified if we follow them too devoutly. Now, with that said, let's open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. Hopefully, we should be able to get some phone calls through the Zoom. It's been a while since we've done this, folks, but you know, technology is a hell of a thing. So call in, have your say. The numbers should be on your screen right underneath my bed. Join the conversation. Make sure that you listen to the phone and not the TV. Yes, I know you want to follow the show on your TV, but then pay attention to your phone when we turn to you, because if you try to have the conversation through your TV, there's a delay and you will be very confused. So please, 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 please look out for that. And as we wait for calls, Karen, this whole situation there, I think it is very much true now that to just lend some support with the fact that I'm not necessarily saying that the government wanted to do all that they did when they started with regards to Petrotrin.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Because it took a long time to get their final position, if my memory is correct. But I do think that to some extent there is a reasonable argument that you're making that at the end of the day, that's what it came down to.
That's because the chairman, Espini, originally was against it. And a number of the board members were against it shutting down. They felt that the answer could be restructuring, like many things that they're doing now, hopefully with WASA and other state-owned enterprises, that this is supposed to make money and give us foreign exchange. So I think people were putting forward solutions that could have been used rather than going to the point of shutting it down, according to the Prime Minister, because a bullet payment was due. And I think that was why it took so long.
We have a caller from Diego Martin. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Mr. Small and the Honorable Karen Nunes Teixeira, the former minister. I listened attentively to the former minister, finance minister, projection of where we would be if we have the same people doing the same thing. It is frightening. If you say our foreign reserve has basically declined about 50%, 48%, it doesn't matter. It shows a steep decline. If we're saying our oil production and our gas production has similarly shown a same pattern, in 5 years' time, because it's the same people wanting to do the same thing, because for 8 years they're telling us it's looking good, look at this. Couple that with what has happened with crime. That has been abysmal. So I don't want to be the prophet of doom and gloom, but we have to be pragmatic and we have to be honest ourselves. The current projection by the current leadership doesn't fare well to us. If I am an investor and I'm looking at place to invest, and I look at Guyana and I look at Trinidad, where am I going to put my money? I'm going to put my money where I will get the greatest return on my investment. And Trinidad, because of its economic and political reality, we are faced with a hard decision. And we have an election coming up, is basically true. The other laughable thing, I'm using a strong term, I listen to an independent senator bringing a private motion on beefing up the Commission of Inquiry. Isn't that laughable? We have system in place, but you have the wrong people. You cannot change the system to facilitate mediocrity. What have commissions inquiry brought to us? Let us, if I can remember, the Health Commission. What came up of the Health Commission? Not the procurement legislation. What we did with the procurement legislation, everybody had passed it in 2015 or 2016, you know, we estimated. Look what we got out of that. We got buying ladders, remember, for the fire trucks, and we got batteries for the TTPS lasting 2 hours? If you Google that, the normal battery, they tell you 6 to 12 years, 6 to 12 months, 6 to 12 hours, which is basically the working reality of a police officer. So that tells you flawed procurement. And nobody wants to take, everybody making an excuse. They say because some of the police might be able to use it and things like that. That is laughable. That is where we have the TTPS. And I'm not going to say more. Okay, let us look at the Simmons Commission of Inquiry. One of the deliverables was the NOC. What we did, we implemented and then we matched it up again. And I'm going to bring one that Ms. Tisha will British side with me. The Clico Commission of Inquiry. Why are we hiding it for? It has certain things in that Commission of Inquiry to basically go forward and let people account for the misdeeds. And we hiding it. We put it under a DTP. We gave him no resources to do what? To help some of our friends and things. Look, this fight with the Stuart Young and Ram Narayan and the rest of the people. The only thing I can see that has been positive is we highlighting the weaknesses of Paria. The only thing Paria has done to the country and the industry while it's in play is realize for debts and not want to account for it. That is sad. And I putting it on the table now. Those 4 people plus the driver must be given the highest national award because they lost their lives trying to move Trinidad forward. Trying to move forward. And a big question hasn't been answered and everybody's shying away. Why were they trying to fix a decommissioned pipeline? That is a salient point, you know. That pipeline was decommissioned, you know. There has to have a reason. Come and tell us why. I don't want to say Delphi might be part of it. But why were you doing that? I'm going to have a nice morning.
Yeah.
Thank you, caller.
I don't want to go down that road, but you see, I think to a large extent, and this is human nature, I think when one is faced with incontrovertible data, for want of a better word, it's very hard to accept it. And what the government has done, they now want to borrow 10 billion. They don't want to tell you how they're going to spend it. They took out the HSF about how many times, and part of it was for COVID, but they also got a lot of support from the international community for the COVID also. And the last borrowing went into the consolidated fund, so I don't know how that had anything to do with COVID. But what I will say is that what the government has done and continues to do is borrow to the hilt. And by borrowing to the hilt, it is a way of keeping persons quiet. They say, what you worrying about? You know, it's like you running a business. Right now, we at one time, certainly when I was in office, our debt to GDP. For every dollar that we spent, we owed about 23 cents, 40 cents. Now it's about 75 cents. And when it is 75 cents, that's okay if you're America, as I said, or Japan, because they get paid back. But when you look at the state of our economy, which is energy-based, there's no doubt we do have the production and we do have the price. There's no doubt that we close down a refinery, we're not refining oil. And whatever production you're getting from Heritage can in no way make up for what the government needs in terms of revenue to run this country. I am waiting to see what the minister is going to say when he has to read the budget in September, October, as to what the revenue position is, and the excuse he's going to talk about the volatility of oil and matter. That he doesn't have to write it. He just goes to bar speeches and say, pull out paragraph 2 out of that one, and let me read and put it in. Which only goes to show that you're very well aware that the country's revenue and its ability to move forward, you're putting all the eggs into one basket, refuse to have other baskets to deal with it. And people just don't want to deal with it. That's human nature. They're people who are committed to a particular party, so they don't want to hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, apart from being committed to a party and therefore they don't want anything, people don't like bad news, and they just hope that all this borrowing will turn out to our advantage when we get the gas from nowhere.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you could borrow as a nation, but your GDP has to be growing. It has to be growing to keep up or outpace the debt, the interest, the rate of debt. And you make a good point. I was thinking, what are the guarantees that we will grow enough, if at all, right?
Even with that, I had Dr. Arjun has spoken on it, so he's recorded in the newspaper, but I wanted to have him on another thing. He says, we have to move away, the government has to move away now from the GDP aspect to revenue, because even if GDP is all the goods and services you produce in a year for a country in a fiscal year, but that doesn't mean that's what the government gets. The government taxes that, which is why the Revenue Authority is so important, because the Revenue Authority they still say would give you $2-3 billion, which can pay all the public servants and pay our local bills. The gambling can do the same thing. So, even if you don't want to go the diversification route right away, because it's going to take a lot of work and it will take time for it to really take effect, you certainly have some very low-hanging fruit to help the country in a difficult time. But, people don't want to see it. They just don't want to see it. That's what it is. They want to put their down.
The problem is, and Nicola made a good point. Now, I don't have a strong opinion over changing Commission of Inquiries and what changes the private motion suggested. But I will say this. He's right to say that you cannot make compensation and make changes to facilitate mediocrity, right? We could put systems in place to try to prevent corruption and actions in bad faith. But at the end of the day, every system of economic system, rules, regulations, it comes down to people. And people there will be those who want to exploit it. They want to find the loopholes. And we can't then also try now to have a system to safeguard against bad faith actors, but also have to safeguard against our own complacency and willingness to just have mediocre output and mediocre performance, and it's not as though other public sectors throughout the world are so much more efficient than us. There are some that are, but more importantly, if you don't want to compare us to the outside, we have to look at ourselves and say, hey, at some point, how far can we fall before we realize we can't afford it anymore? We can't just.
We're gonna have to find it out. But what they're doing meanwhile is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing.
Because
the problem with the borrowing though is they relied, I suppose, investors or bondholders, people who invest and lend us money, look at that as a security for them as the HSF. But the issue with the HSF, which is really an investment vehicle in stocks and shares, mainly United States stocks and shares, they're not getting any money in there because you have to have made 60% more than your budgeted amount for oil and gas. Now, oil is going at about $85, which is why the Heritage might be doing okay. But if you're only producing 50-something thousand barrels, and just in a few years back it was 114,000 barrels, what does that really say?
Before COVID, just before COVID, Minister of Finance had a press conference. Price of oil was bad. So again, this debt situation, we could have afforded mediocrity before. We were rich. We were the new money family on the block. And then the money ran out. And we have a lifestyle that we're accustomed to that government seemingly wants to try to maintain. But you know what happens when a family...
For their voters.
Right. You know what happens when a family that was rich now tries to use their credit card and loans to keep financing a lifestyle they can't afford. It will come up.
I think middle class is the better example because, if you're wealthy, you will write it out because you can write it out. But if you are middle class, it's the middle class. I read someone had out. I didn't read the article. But someone was talking about how the middle class are the biggest, which is always in every country, because the middle class really live a lifestyle that they have a mortgage on a house that they could have afforded 10 years ago, whatever, 8 years ago. They have their children in private school, private lessons. They have their children going on vacation every year. They go out to dinner once a week, and nothing is wrong with that. If you're working and you have educated yourself, nothing is wrong with all of that. But what is happening is that same middle class is really feeling the crunch because of the cost of living, and you're seeing slowly but surely a disappearing middle class. People who are trying. It reminds me of a British satirical comedy, which is based on keeping up with your neighbors, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And I think there are a lot of people who are struggling right now and hoping that things will turn around. But you have to look at the facts. Your Prime Minister said it. He said it. He said if we do not get 4.1 billion cubic feet per day to keep everything going in this country, we and new investors, we are in that. He said it himself. And right now, they had two figures. One said 2.8. So I'm going on figures that I am relying on that I had from a month ago. But I don't think anything is different. But from the Ministry of Energy, it was 2.4 cubic feet per billion, 2 billion cubic feet per day when you need 4.1. You don't have the production. You don't have the price. And by the way, all of this saying about how the non-energy petrochemical industry is doing well. I said it to you already that I asked an economist, well respected. I said, what percentage of the GDP, the goods and services produced in the country, does that represent? He said about 6%. But that's not what goes to the government. What goes to the government is the taxes on that. So think how much that could be. And then on top of that, many of them, many of the economists, she's well respected, tied up with my point, is one of the reasons why the government resisted devaluation is because that same non-energy, non-petrochemical that is supposed to be keeping us going whilst the energy sector is in real trouble, a lot of the raw material is imported into this country. So if you went and if you devalue, you take away the competitiveness of that of the non-energy sector. So what I am saying, I don't want to be no doomsday. I hope they could find a wholesale of gas somewhere. But when they find it, it will take a few years before it will come on stream. But at least people will say, for a fact, there is, and therefore we will come out of this, and we'll just tighten our belt for a few years as we have done in the past. But I'm just not seeing it. And I'm not seeing the minister coming forward to say anything different except to go on the attack, go on the defensive, and not give any hope, because I don't think he has much hope. I really don't think he has much hope, because if he did, he'd say it, because that's his style. Everybody has a different style. And if I have to go by his style and how I have understood him to, you know, he would be out there telling, because, and I understand why he would do it, because if I were in government, you don't want to give bad news, because all the investors listening. You don't want to give the bad news, because the local investors listening. So you want to give a positive thing, but you want one that is realistic, and don't mislead the public. I need to use the word mislead. Do not make the public think that one thing, a situation exists that may not exist. I correct myself, eh?
Well, we have to end things there, Karen. I know there's a lot to say, but
time flies when I'm having fun with you, Sean.
No, I'll just say this to close. I'll just say this. Thanks for joining me, and thanks to our caller from Digger Martin. I'll just say this to close. As you said, the middle class is shrinking, and my concerns is that might very well be that as the middle class shrinks, upward mobility in our society withers with it. And when the lower economic brackets have no hope to moving upwards, then what does that say about us? And I'll just leave things there, despite all of that.
And we hope for the best, seriously, though. No, I'm not joking.
I know. Wink, wink, hint, hint.
I'm ready. No, I'm not. Because I love Trinidad and I want the best.
Right.
Things not looking good.
With all that said, we still believe in TNT despite all the pessimism, folks. Make today a good day. We have to do it for ourselves. Elections are coming up. Put more thought into it. We will see you. No promises. I'll see you when I see you. Hopefully I feel better tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Sean.
WESN.
Fellow citizens, I am Joy Abdul Mohan. Many years ago, we declared through our constitution our desire to live in a democratic society with respect for the law, supported by public institutions that respond to our needs. A strong constitution must be relevant to every citizen, including children and the youth. We've heard about reform before. Let us speak out now and make it happen by submitting our views to constitutionalreform2024.gov.tt by April 15th. It's our future, our constitution, our voices.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
name is Carl Media. I am the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Coming soon to WESN.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why.
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren. Coming soon to WESN.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue, St. Anne's. WESN 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. Metropolitan Bookshop, Ariapita Avenue, Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
Young at heart, purpose-driven, patriot even. When you like to party, but are still passionate about discussing important issues, the only place where your needs will be met is WESN Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
And this is not just for Latvia, but for many European countries.
Yeah, and Sven Mixer, what do you think of the role that the cost of living crisis is going to play then in Estonia? Because in other parts of Europe, we've seen populist parties on the rise because of this very issue.
Obviously, socioeconomic issues play a very significant role in each and every election campaign in every country. I think that what makes the Baltic countries unique, or not unique, but special, is that we understand that right now there is one issue on the European agenda that is both extremely urgent but also existential for the whole rules-based international order, and that's the need to help Ukraine win this war. Obviously, it involves very significant cost for our citizens all across Europe, but particularly in some European countries, it involves sacrifices, and I think that it's extremely important that these costs, that this burden be borne in a way that is equitable, both between the individual European countries, as well as between and among different social segments in the society.
More support for consumers then, for example, in Estonia to help
absolutely.
bear the cost.
I think it's also critical for maintaining the very high degree of support for this effort of helping Ukraine to win the war. So I think that our governments back in our capitals need to do more to make sure that this cost is shared equitably and fairly, but also European Union will have to make sure that we take very seriously the concerns of particular economic sectors as well as particular segments in the societies of individual member states.
So on energy independence, I wanted to ask you, Stasys Yakulinias, because as I said in the introduction, you are still with the Greens European Free Alliance, even though you're an independent MEP now. But Lithuania wants to get 90% of its energy from renewables by the end of this year. Is that a realistic goal, do you think?
Probably not by the end of this year, but
end of the decade, I said. Sorry, I should have said end 2030. I meant.
Yeah, so it's more realistic, but the problem is, because it's volatile energy, it's renewable solar and wind, they're not stable, so you have to store it somewhere. So we have to be a balancing act. So we have this huge LNG terminal, which creates this possibility for being independent, at least from Russia. But we are becoming independent, or became independent, from larger and more costly imports of LNG from other places. But what is important about energy is the volatility of prices, because Lithuania moved into, I think, irrational liberalization of the electricity market, and consumers have to choose which supplier and which plan is optimal for them, which is impossible to predict in this volatile environment. So that creates uncertainties and confusion, I think, anxieties among consumers.
And volatility, of course, related again to the whole geopolitical situation. And I want to get back to what Sven Mikser mentioned about the war in Ukraine and the impact that's having. So if we look at GDP spending in the three Baltics back in 2022, they were already above NATO averages. Estonia 2.34%, Latvia 2.10%, Lithuania 2.36%. The current goal for all three countries is 3% of spending. Stasys Yakulinias, but you've actually said that Russia is a nuclear state which can't be defeated, and somewhat controversially within your party group, you abstained in votes on Belarus and Russia. Does that mean you would not spend this extra money on defense?
Well, I think defense and security consists not only on military spending, but on also of diplomatic actions, So we have to deal with these neighbors one way or another. Sooner or later, there have to be negotiations. So I think Lithuania and some other countries, at least the government of Lithuania, is very active in trying to defeat Russian empire, let's say, or Russian state, which I think is not very possible, unlikely. So some NATO officials, high-ranking NATO officials, which we visited a couple of years ago almost, agreed that there is no military solution in Ukraine. I would add that there is no military solution favorable for Ukraine now. Even though I support Ukraine and all these people, all the diverse cultures there, I think we have to be realistic. So, we have to find the solution. Reasons for that war, my short thesis is, this is unjustified and illegal war, as it was the war in Iraq, but this is a provoked war. Russian aggression was provoked. So this is the point that they want to make.
Ivar Yabs, what about this goal of 3% on defense spending? Where are you at on that?
This is a necessity, and I think if the confrontation with the Russian aggressor goes on, I think that 3% is a lower limit in many ways. But as for the remark about Russia being provoked and so on and so forth, I think that this is really an illusion that the current Russia with its current regime has any place in the future European security architecture. This is an aggressor, a revanchist country which wants to redraw the borders and which doesn't see the Baltic states as independent, pro-European Western countries.
We cannot afford this sort of defeatist attitude. I think we absolutely have to make sure that Russia is defeated on the Ukrainian battlefields. I think it's the matter of survival for the whole international order.
Yeah.
We have UN Security Council, which is tasked with preserving, maintaining international order, and now we have a country that sits veto-powered on the UN Security Council and has waged a war of aggression against an independent democratic neighbor. I think we absolutely have to make sure that Russia does not come out of this on top. I think there is insufficient understanding in some corners of Europe of the existential nature of this threat. And defense spending, I mean, collectively in Europe, we have been taking out the peace dividend for far too long. And if we want to play the role in the international global arena over the next decades, we will have to be strong industrially, economically, politically, morally, but also militarily. That is absolutely unavoidable.
Yeah, to respond just briefly, because I want to come back.
Yeah, I'll just about 3%. I think we need to reach 3%, but not necessarily to go over that, because we have to balance act. Baltic countries spend as part of their budget revenues significant amount, because the budget revenues compared to GDP is quite low. So we are spending a lot already, but military spending, as I mentioned, is not enough. We have to do more, and we have to understand why this war started, and therefore this is the key how to end this war. Military solutions, I say, it's impossible.
It's absolutely important that the larger European countries actually reach 2% and then higher, because today we take great pride and say that more and more countries meet this threshold, but it's mostly small or medium-sized countries, and collectively I think we are still not doing enough.
And just briefly, Ivars, what do you make of all these latest moves at the EU level on reforming defence procurement and defence, the financing of common defence, and Latvia's role in all of that?
Well, I was a rapporteur for one of those files, the so-called DIRPA, and I know what does it mean to reach a consensus in this House about how you procure defense materials, but it's still the way to go. But as for the finance in general, first of all, all the NATO member states in Europe should pay at least those 2%, which doesn't happen right now. But as for the future, I think that certain integration of that European pillar of NATO is a necessity, and this applies also to financing. As we all know, the French president has just came with an initiative which is something like the RRF, the next gen EU, not now this time for defense. I think such initiatives are going to be necessary, because I don't think that the Russian aggressive attitude towards the West is going to stop anywhere soon.
Okay, let's end it there. We've run out of time. Thank you so much to Ivars Iabs, Sven Mikser and Stasis Yakelunas. That's all for this edition of Talking Europe. Thanks for watching.
With news breaking at record speeds around the world.
Monitor right now 575 cameras. That number continues to grow.
Take time to go beyond the headlines.
Most of the foreign, they expect a lot of things in Korea. In reality, everything is changed.
France 24's senior reporters and correspondents take a deep dive into the stories that matter in Reporters and Reporters Plus.
Ukrainian forces are digging themselves in all over Bakhmut in case the Russians manage to make any significant progress.
Award-winning documentaries from across the globe on France 24 and France24.com.
It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with Solange Mougin. Solange, hello.
Hi, Judy.
So on March 4th, 2024, France became the first nation in the world to enshrine abortion rights into its constitution. Now, Solange, you're going to take a look back at how France reached this milestone, and it really is one because abortion was actually once a capital punishment offense in France.
Yeah, it was. Under the Vichy regime in the 1940s, performing an abortion was actually a death penalty crime. 2 women were des faiseuses d'ange, which literally translates as angel makers. Well, they were guillotined for helping other women end their pregnancies. Now, after World War II, that changed, but it was still a crime. And a 1920 law also made informing people about contraception illegal. So thousands of women every year risked their lives to end unwanted pregnancies, and hundreds of women died every year from them.
Avec ces moyens-là, si on avait d'autres moyens, on aurait fait d'autres moyens, j'aurais été à l'étranger.
So then, Solange, it was a growing women's movement in the 1950s and the 1960s that began to change things, starting with contraception.
Yeah, amidst massive protests and societal change, in 1967, the Nevers law passed, and it legalized contraception. But for years, administrative roadblocks of sorts kept the pill from readily being available. And then on April 5th, 1971, hundreds of famous French women, including Françoise Sagan, Jeanne Moreau, Catherine Deneuve, they signed a letter written by Simone de Beauvoir, and this was called the Manifesto of the 343, and it was published in the Nouvel Observateur, with the women saying, quote, "I declare that I am one of them. I declare that I have had an abortion."
Avec le manifeste des 343, on a l'irruption des femmes qui disent, voilà, c'est à nous de décider, c'est notre corps, et c'est à nous aussi de prendre la parole.
Now, a week later, the satirical paper Charlie Hebdo, they called it the Manifesto of the 343 Sluts, and the name it stuck. Case in point over how divisive and taboo this abortion issue was, and also how courageous these women were as well.
Now, the manifesto was important, but it wasn't the only thing that shifted public opinion, was it?
No, along the years of protests of the MLAC, or the Movement for Abortion and Contraception Rights, and another manifesto by doctors, there was a 1972 court case that really illustrated how views were shifting away from the Catholic Church's stance. Now, this Bobigny trial was taken on by the French lawyer Gisèle Halimi, and she successfully defended a young woman who'd been raped and had an illegal abortion, as we hear right here.
Ce jugement est quand même pas irréversible.
Vers un changement de la loi. Now, the decision to put forth a bill that would make abortion legal was actually a very risky one at the time.
It was incredibly so. Not only had a previous bill been tabled, but President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, he did not have the votes to pass it with his own conservative majority. The job in November 1974 was taken on by then Health Minister Simone Veil, who stood up before 481 male MPs and just 9 women to plead the case for legal, safe abortions for all French women.
Aucune femme ne recourt de gaieté de cœur à l'avortement. Il suffit d'écouter les femmes.
Now, Simone Veil was a Holocaust survivor, and she was very much so verbally abused at the time by the MPs, saying that what she was doing was the equivalent of gassing fetuses and of Nazism. But after much suspense in Parliament, she prevailed, and at 3:40 in the morning on the 29th of November, 1974, after some 25 hours of debate, the Veil Act was passed.
Now, since then, of course, abortion and contraception rights have expanded even more. Where do things stand today?
Well, today, abortions are legal for up to 14 weeks and no longer 10 weeks. They're also reimbursed by the national health care system. Contraception is also free for young people. It's illegal to impede as well access to abortion and to abortion information. Women's rights groups, however, have been fighting for years for the removal of the doctor's conscience clause, or the refusal to perform the act for personal reasons.
Pourquoi faire une clause spécifique alors qu'une clause générale existe déjà? C'est une forme de stigmatisation de l'avortement.
Now, on top of this, the French planning familial, which is the equivalent of Planned Parenthood, they say that 130 clinics have closed in the past 15 years, and access is more difficult in certain regions of France. Now, the number of abortions has actually remained relatively steady, with around 230,000 in 2022. Now, despite campaigns from the far right and also from certain religious groups, some 80% of French people, well, they are in favor of abortion rights. It is no longer as divisive an issue politically like in the US or even like it was here in France. And it's actually the overturning of Roe versus Wade that really put the wind in the sails of this constitutional push, which culminated, of course, in the word liberté, or having the freedom to have an abortion, being added to the French Constitution.
Now, the choice of that specific word, liberté, was actually much debated.
Yeah, and liberté garantie is the final word choice for Article 34 of the Constitution. They are our words du jour. Initially, the proposal was for the addition of the word droit, or right, to an abortion to be added, but this was met with a bit of pushback from the Conservative Senate. So a compromise was found after the Council of State assured MPs that the word right and freedom carried the same sort of enshrining weight here, thus allowing for this milestone in French history to happen.
It really is a milestone. And Solange, thank you so much for explaining all of that, giving us some history on French abortion rights here in France. Don't forget, if you have your own questions about France or the French, you can also reach out to Solange on social media, or of course check out our website, the French Connection site on France24.com.
WESN.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Defense Force worker involved in fatal crash released. Barataria police boast of reduction in crime. Minister Hines says he's unaware of its internal challenges at the SSE. Now for the details. The soldier who was involved in the hit-and-run accident on the highway in Presal on Thursday, 28 March, which left a Kiss Bakery delivery truck driver dead, has been released. The deceased is 55-year-old Neil Balai of Eccles Trace in Spring Village, Valsine. Balai and another man were in the truck proceeding south along the Solomon Hochoy Highway when a black Hyundai Ioniq Nissan registered PDR 7741 hit them from behind, causing Balai to lose control. The truck ran off the highway, killing Balai at the scene. The car, which is registered to a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, identified as Jelani Map, fled the scene. Officers of the Barataria Police District have announced a significant achievement in crime reduction. During a recent town meeting at the Barataria Community Center on March 25th, Senior Superintendent Movin Edwards revealed to residents that serious crimes in the division has decreased by 30%. According to Senior Superintendent Edwards, the Barataria Policing District recorded 100 serious crimes from January 1st to March 25th, 2023. In contrast, for the same period in 2024, only 70 reports were received, marking a 30% reduction. Additionally, the division currently boasts a 19% solvency rate. Expressing further goals, Senior Superintendent Edwards stated that the division aims to achieve a solvency rate of 30 to 35%. National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines has absolved himself of blame regarding the ongoing issues at the Strategic Services Agency. Addressing the media at his ministry's headquarters in Port of Spain yesterday, Minister Hines emphasized that although he holds constitutional responsibility for the SSA, he was unaware of its internal challenges. He asserted that had he been informed of the situation earlier, he would have taken prompt action to address the agency's issues. expressing a willingness to rectify the situation on behalf of the government.
And we began to hear murmurings and public disquiet about the dispensation of firearms in the country. Tom, Dick, Harry, drunk, deported, criminal record under 21 with gun. In some cases, 47 gun, 45 gun, 29 gun, just so. We became concerned because all commissioners, all previous governments, including the one that he was a part of, he was a Minister of National Security for 14 months. And all governments practiced a restrictive policy on the business of firearms. And more so now, because the United States, there are many states in the United States that don't practice a restrictive policy where you assess an individual application on the basis of need, on the basis of capacity to safely manage this lethal weapon, inherently dangerous thing, and then you issue it on the basis of that.
With that, City News on the Hour on WESN. I am Sira Ali. Thank you for watching.
WESN.
Coming soon to WESN.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond
want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'd ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren. Coming soon to WESN.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process, we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there, next to himself. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody, and
the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we kind of at a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's been the victim, or the man has been the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with. This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful. The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the game.
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Jacinto, thank you very much. Now, Senegal's new president, Bassirou Faye, was little known until he received the backing of Ousmane Sonko, the country's most famous and popular opposition figure. Sonko himself had been barred from running for the presidency, and both men were in jail just days before the election was held last month. But then, in an extraordinary turn, propelled by Sonko's support, Faye won the election, and yesterday he appointed Sonko as his prime minister, confirming a sea change at the top of Senegalese politics. Matthew Mary Karushet has this.
Even though he was silent, former opposition leader Ousmane Sonko was the center of attention at the swearing-in ceremony for Senegal's new president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye. As Sonko had been barred from running for office in last month's elections, his close ally Faye was largely seen as his proxy. Indeed, just hours after Faye assumed office, he appointed Sonko to be his prime minister.
At the meeting that closed our election campaign, I said we were all working to get President Bassirou Diomaye Faye elected. There will be no question of leaving him to shoulder this responsibility alone.
Sonko finished third in the 2019 presidential election and is popular among young people. He spent much of the last year in prison before being freed last month. Sonko became a key figure in his second-in-command's fiery campaign to tackle corruption in a country with severe economic hardship.
I bring to you my little brother, my friend, who is the candidate for us all, Bassirou Diomaye Faye.
Now in power, the two men will have to meet the immense expectations of the Senegalese people. Faye has pledged to restore national sovereignty by renegotiating international contracts for fossil fuel extraction. He has also vowed to create jobs, as 20% of the population is unemployed.
Now, this week marks the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Rwanda. 3 decades on, efforts are still underway now to archive documents related to the massacre of some 800,000 people, most of them Tutsis, particularly personal testimonies of survivors. With this report from the capital, Kigali, here's Clement Di Roma.
These survivors of the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda are sifting through thousands of files. Their organization is still looking for information about what led up to the massacres 30 years ago.
There may be new testimonies, and there may also be information about the preparation of the genocide. We want to make these documents accessible so that researchers who need them will have access to them, just like other people who want to know what happened during the genocide, how it was prepared, how it was executed.
After initial sorting, documents are digitally scanned and stored on dedicated computer servers. The group began updating storage of the archives in early 2022.
All these papers we sort here will be digitized. Without numbering and digitizing them, the archive process isn't complete.
Today, the preservation of documents related to the genocide is a national priority. Another NGO, Aegis Trust, focuses its efforts to safeguard history on collecting recorded accounts of what happened. This woman lost all of her children during the 1994 mass killings.
I was asked to testify and accepted because I'm sure that my story will help people heal from their traumas. It will help those who listen to me.
This center offers support to women who lost their husbands in the genocide. Many have shared their stories. The accounts are later translated into English and posted online. Every year, the time left to collect these perspectives grows smaller.
The elderly people are aging. They're starting to forget. So we mustn't miss this. We must use every possible means to record these testimonies while there's still time.
As part of its commemorative efforts, Rwanda will introduce digital tours of the 170 memorial sites that are also the final resting places of many of the victims of the genocide.
Well, we're staying with Rwanda now because our culture team has also been in Kigali to discover the artistic scene and meet some of those who are rewriting Rwanda's creative future. Our culture editor, Eve Jackson, is with me to tell us a little more. Eve.
All this week on our daily culture show, Arts 24, we're bringing you portraits of Rwandan artists. Now, to give you some background about Rwanda, it's a fascinating place. They call it the country of 1,000 hills. It's known for its breathtaking scenery. And even in the capital, Kigali, it is pretty breathtaking. It's tiny. It's only got a population of 14 million. And the capital, Kigali, it's spotless, it's safe, and it's buzzing. Paul Kagame, of course, has been president since 2000 and is said to lead with an iron fist. So it wasn't always that easy to talk about political situation there, but we did get to talk about lots of other things. More than 3/4 of Rwandans were actually born after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis. So the population is incredibly young, incredibly talented, and it's very inspiring. The artists we met talked openly about the effect the trauma of the genocide, even if they weren't alive then, has had on them, sort of the intergenerational trauma. One of the musicians we met, you can see there, is called Kaya Binchi. She performed a song for us, which is called The Colour of Blood. It's a reflection of her country's dark past. Take a listen.
It's the same source we came from, the same air we breathe in, beyond the colors of our skin, beyond beliefs and races.
Color of Blood is inspired by my experience with so many different people from different places, but also it's pushed by the story of my country. When you kill somebody else, it's a person, they have their color is red. So for me, it was that symbol of what we have in common, but with the idea behind that we are all the same despite our differences.
Now, Eve, as you say, with more than 3/4 of Rwandans being under the age of 30, youth culture has its very own musical genre they've created to talk about their everyday lives. Tell us a bit about it.
And it's called, this wave of popular rap music is called Kinya Trap. It's in the Kinyarwanda language. We actually went to the studio of one of its founders, Bushali, you can see there, who is a mega star in Rwanda. He arrived with superstar energy straight out of the gate. He's been delivering hit after hit for the last 10 or so years. He's on his 5th album. He's only 24, and it's called Full Moon. It's out later this year. His songs, even though we don't understand them, but he explained them to us, paint a picture of the urban trials and tribulations in Rwanda. In Rwanda, 40% of the population do live under the poverty line, and that is a world from which he comes, and that's what he sings about.
Young people love Kinya Trap because they see themselves in it. It's music with meaning. I sing about underprivileged kids coming home from school and going to sleep on hard cement. They can identify with me because I'm like them, and I'm young too.
And Eve, throughout this week on Arts 24, you're bringing us portraits of artists and of fashion designers.
Well, there's so many artists that we got to meet. We visited one of Kigali's top fashion houses. It's called Motions, and it was founded in 2015 by Moses Turahirwa. Now, he is known for reimagining traditional Rwandan motifs into contemporary pieces. Ivorian footballer Didier Drogba is one of his clients. So is the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So he does have international fans around the world. He is planning as well a fashion show here in Paris in May. And he is taking fashion to the next level.
Rwanda fashion scene is very new. Since the 90s, we had only like one factory making the clothing. It was not a culture at all. So I think it's on the rise where it can be spotted as something new, and it has a very bright future.
If you want to watch some of these reports in detail or a special show that we filmed in Kigali, you can check out our website at france24.com. The show's called Arts 24, of course, and that will be on all this week.
Fabulous. I want to see more of that fashion. Thanks very much, Eve Jackson, for us there. It's time for a quick break from us here in the newsroom. Do stay tuned. More world news coming up after this. Bye for now.
I was born here. I spent a day here, then crossed the border from France to Belgium illegally. They had to hide us under blankets.
Christophe is one of the thousands of children taken from their young mothers. Women who gave birth anonymously in France, but also in Belgium, and were left with no choice.
Yes, I lost my child, my baby. It's so inhumane. I still can't really understand it.
Their babies were then sold in Belgium by Catholic organizations.
With total impunity, Therese Wan stole my childhood, my adolescence, our lives.
From Belgium to France and back, follow the children trying to retrace their origins and demanding answers at last.
Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.
C'était vraiment hyper sympa parce qu'il y avait énormément de monde sur le parcours. Bon, j'avais jamais fait une course avec un plateau, avec une tasse à café, un verre d'eau plein et un croissant. Et voilà, c'est très festif. Et puis c'était pour mettre en avant vraiment aussi voilà, ce qui fait l'ADN, la culture de Paris.
C'est nouveau, c'est une course, il y a tous les gens du métier, il y a vous les caméras, tout ça. C'est ce qui fait le moment un peu particulier, quoi. Mais non, c'est bien, ça fédère autour du métier. Et le Parisien et même la France entière, elle aime bien ces garçons de café. Voilà, la France des bistrots.
Mais je suis là parce que ça c'est un truc incroyable, c'est vraiment parisien pour moi. Moi j'adore le café de Paris, ça c'est la raison que je suis là, que j'habite là. Et ça c'est vraiment rigolo.
France 24, your window on the world. Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Welcome back to Around the World here on France 24. I'm Nadia Massi. A reminder of our top stories this half hour. The bodies of 6 foreign aid workers killed in Israeli strikes transported out of Gaza today. This as pressure mounts on Israel to explain what happened. Ukraine lowers its conscription age to 25, the army saying it needs more young men to push back the Russian offensive. And NATO foreign ministers consider setting up a €100 billion 5-year fund for Ukraine. This as the alliance marks its 75th anniversary. Welcome to the programme. Pressure is mounting on Israel after 7 people working for the charity World Central Kitchen were killed in an Israeli strike in Gaza. 3 British nationals were among those killed, and the UK government is demanding an immediate, impartial investigation. Karis Garland has this first report.
Describing them as 7 beautiful souls, World Central Kitchen paid tribute on social media to its workers killed in Gaza. 3 British citizens, Polish and Australian nationals, a Canadian-American dual national and a Palestinian died when Israeli airstrikes hit their convoy on Monday night. Among them was Zomi Frankom. Her friends have remembered her infectious smile and sense of humanity.
She makes you feel like you're the only person in a room. And so as a plate of food went from service provider to service recipient, that could be a very cold exchange if it's just a plate of food. But Zomi would produce that in a way that made you know that there was a connection.
World Central Kitchen said it had coordinated its movement with the army, but its team was targeted while travelling in a deconflicted zone in cars branded with the charity's logo. The Israeli military issued its mea culpa and apologized for the deaths. It says it's launching an independent investigation to be carried out in the coming days.
The strike was not carried out with the intention of harming WCK aid workers. It was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night during a war in a very complex conditions. It shouldn't have happened.
The strikes have drawn condemnation from world leaders, including from the American president. Joe Biden said he was outraged and heartbroken, adding that Israel had not been doing enough to protect aid workers. The deaths have prompted World Central Kitchen and other aid organizations to suspend operations in Gaza. It comes as the US and other countries are setting up a maritime aid corridor from Cyprus to get around restrictions on deliveries by road. On Tuesday, Cyprus said one ship was returning to the Mediterranean island with around 240 tons of aid that had not been unloaded.
Well, over 30,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since October, and the massive Israeli bombing campaign has also caused unprecedented material damage. Brian Quinn has been looking into a little of that destruction to the infrastructure in Gaza. He has this report. Our apologies, it seems we're having a few technical problems playing that report for you. Let's move on and see if we can bring you some other world news on the programme. And to Afghanistan now, where the United Nations says that 10% of children under the age of 5 are now malnourished. Hunger has been exacerbated in the country, the report says, since the Taliban swept to power in 2021. Catherine Khadir-Clifford tells us a bit more.
This community health post is a lifeline for over 1,000 residents from the local village. Women come to have their babies screened for malnutrition. Hasina and her husband run the post as volunteers.
I don't have any community health worker training yet, but I used to go for training with my mother-in-law. I learnt many things from her, and now I'm gathering women together here every month. Now I have enough training to teach others.
According to the UN, 10% of children under 5 in Afghanistan are malnourished and 45% are stunted.
If not detected and treated within the first 2 years of a child's life, the condition becomes irreversible and the affected child will never be able to develop mentally and physically to its full potential. This is not only tragic for the individual child, but must have a severe negative impact on the development of the whole country when more than 2 out of 5 children are affected.
The World Food Programme says it estimates 3 million children will be malnourished in the country this year.
We will be able to reach just 1.6 million of those. WFP already had to cut down our critical food rations to the families. That is going to translate into more malnutrition.
Women are also particularly impacted. The NGO reported 1.2 million cases of malnutrition in those who were pregnant or breastfeeding last year. Community workers say it's difficult to raise awareness on health and sanitation among mothers, as many are illiterate, pushed out of education and public life under Taliban rule.
Now, the foreign ministers of NATO are meeting today to discuss how to supply Ukraine with more weapons in the years ahead. Behind closed doors, NATO leaders are reportedly also trying to Trump-proof the alliance in the event that Donald Trump wins the US election in November. With more, here's Charlie James.
It's no secret Donald Trump is not a fan of NATO.
NATO was busted until I came along.
And with the prospect of Trump returning to the White House, current NATO leaders are trying to plan ahead. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg has proposed a €100 billion 5-year fund for Ukraine, seen as a way to Trump-proof this military support.
We must ensure reliable and predictable security assistance to Ukraine for the long haul. We are transforming NATO's comprehensive assistance package into a multi-year program of assistance.
Trump has been historically cozy with Vladimir Putin, and last month he startled allies when he said any NATO country not meeting its financial obligations would not get U.S. help if Russia threatened them.
No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
In what is also seen as a preemptive move, there has been a steep increase in NATO countries meeting the spending target of 2% of GDP on defense.
In 2014, there were only 3 allies at 2%. Now there are, in 2024, there's likely to be about 20. So I think the Europeans have turned a corner. And that might help mitigate the effect of such comments and Trump's potential position.
Stoltenberg's proposal also envisions NATO taking more control from a U.S.-led coalition to coordinate arms supplies to Ukraine. He argues this could help insulate from any political changes in NATO countries.
Well, NATO gained a new member earlier this year. Sweden joined the alliance in March, and it's a huge shift for the country that had a policy of neutrality for more than 200 years. To find out how the alliance has changed Sweden, my colleague Clovis Casali travelled to the Gotland island, which is east of the mainland. Here's his report.
A live fire exercise for young Swedish conscripts. Professional soldiers are there for guidance.
It's good to have someone experienced who can help.
Don't worry, you're very good at hitting the target.
Sweden is remilitarizing Gotland, its island located in the heart of the Baltic Sea, and some 300 kilometers from the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. The invasion of Ukraine ordered by President Vladimir Putin has sparked concern among Nordic countries.
The cooperation between Finland and Sweden has been going on for quite a while. Also within a NATO context can keep on refining the cooperations with also Iceland, Denmark and Norway within a Nordic context, which will make NATO even stronger.
Joint exercises have been taking place and Stockholm is planning for more in Gotland in June. Just like its neighbour Finland, Sweden has put an end to its traditional neutrality and has just joined NATO, unthinkable still a few years ago. The Swedish government has warned its citizens to be prepared for a possible war. In this Stockholm building, neighbours organise regularly dinners in the common room. They take turns in preparing the meals. At times they talk about politics and Russia.
We are not naive, but we don't want to think too much about it. If something happens, it will be that you can't take out money from your money machine, there will be no electricity, and not bombing.
It's very traditional in Sweden not to trust the Russians. You don't know what will happen. Anything can happen.
While they all condemn the invasion of Ukraine, some of them feel Sweden should not have joined NATO. They say they would prefer to see the government spend less on armament and more on public services.
Clovis Casali reporting for us there. Now, Ukraine has lowered the military conscription age from 27 to 25. The country has experienced significant losses on the battlefield since Russia launched its invasion over 2 years ago now. And mobilisation, particularly of young men, is a divisive issue in Ukraine, as Gulliver Cragg in Kyiv explains.
The law to reduce the mobilisation age from 27 to 25 was actually passed by the Ukrainian parliament in May 2023, but Volodymyr Zelensky refused to sign it at the time, perhaps knowing that it would be unpopular, also perhaps thinking about Ukraine's demographics. The country is unwilling really to send young men to the front in very large numbers before they've had a chance to have children, because there was already a demographic crisis in Ukraine before the full-scale invasion, and the war has only made things much, much worse. But now the situation has changed, and pressure was mounting on the Ukrainian president for some time now to sign this law and also other measures that would allow the country to recruit more men into the army, because the army is making it very clear that it needs tens of thousands more people. Those who have been fighting for 2 years are very tired. They need to be rotated. The army has suffered major losses as well, of course, and Ukraine understands now that this is going to be a long, hard struggle, that there isn't going to be any quick victory with quick reconquest of territory as people were still hoping back in May 2023. But Ukrainian public opinion is full of contradictions actually when it comes to mobilization. People are generally in favour, in theory, of the idea that the army needs to mobilise more people. But there are all sorts of criticisms of the way that it's being done. And there's also, according to a recent poll, some 53% of Ukrainians who say that they fully understand men who dodge the draft. And a lot of men do. They pay bribes,